My name is Ella Anderson. I am 65. I thought the hardest part of love would be losing my husband, but grief has levels I had not met yet. The church in Chicago felt close and cool. Candles hissed softly, and the old organ sent a low river of sound through the pews. My navy dress held me together like a uniform for a role I did not ask for. People touched my hand and said kind things. They said I was devoted and strong, as if devotion is something you wear like a brooch. I nodded and thanked them because that is what a widow does when the world watches. Outside, the sky hung in a flat sheet of winter light. Our driver took us back to the house in the suburbs where casseroles steamed on the counter and the coats filled the hall. The room smelled like coffee lilies and furniture polish. I walked through faces and memories, keeping my breathing calm. Someone laughed in the next room, a bright sound that did not belong to the day. In the living room, distant cousins studied framed photos as if pricing out my life. Amanda stood near the mantel with her arms folded, smooth hair clipped back, lips pressed thin. She spoke softly, but every word had an edge, telling me it would be better if I found somewhere more appropriate for someone my age. She used the words assisted living as if she were offering me a glass of water. Nash stood behind her with his hands in his pockets. He watched a spot on the rug as if it might tell him what to say. He did not defend me. I felt something colder than grief settle in my chest. Amanda went on saying I was just there, not part of his success. The sentence landed like a door closing. I rested my palm on the back of Charles's chair. The worn leather was warm from all the hands that had leaned there before mine. The sound of forks on plates in the kitchen clicked like small clocks counting down. I told Amanda I understood. I said it quietly, almost like a prayer, and the room seemed to tilt back into place. She blinked, surprised that there was no scene to feed on. I went down the hall to our bedroom. The mirrored closet reflected a woman who looked older than she felt inside, but her spine was straight. I took 2 suitcases from the shelf and laid them open on the bed. Folding clothes steadied me. I chose what I could carry and what would carry me. A sweater that smelled faintly of cedar, the pearl earrings he gave me on a spring afternoon, the shoes that never hurt my feet. In the hallway, a small board held hooks for keys and dog leashes. One hook was bare, a little crescent of shadow, where something should hang. I paused there and let the emptiness write itself into my mind. Voices rose and fell in the kitchen. Someone opened a bottle and the cork popped like a shrug. I tried to listen for Nash, for a word that might lift me, but I heard only the soft chatter of people planning a future that did not include me. I zipped the suitcases and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress gave a familiar sigh, as if tired of holding the shape of our lives. I placed my wedding band flat on the nightstand to keep it from catching on anything. In the foyer, I smoothed my coat and picked up the handles. Amanda appeared again, surprised to find me already in motion. She asked if I needed help, and I told her I was fine. Nash moved to the door but did not meet my eyes. His silence rang louder than any insult. In my chest, something shifted from breakage to clarity. The winter air met me on the porch. I could smell the neighbor's fireplace and the cold metal of the railing under my palm. A car idled at the curb, and the driver glanced at me in the mirror, then looked away. I placed the suitcases in the trunk and climbed into the back seat. The house sat quiet against the pale sky, the windows like blank eyes. I watched the front door, half expecting it to open with a rush of apology that never came. As we pulled away, my hands settled in my lap. I thought of the empty hook again, and what it meant to leave space where a key should hang. They expected pleading and tears. I gave them something they did not know how to hold. I gave them silence. And in that silence, I heard myself clearly for the first time all day. I asked the driver to take me to a modest hotel near the airport. The neon sign buzzed in the cold, and the lobby smelled like carpet shampoo and coffee. I gave the clerk my maiden name, Ella Monroe, and paid in cash with a steady hand. The clerk barely looked up. People see a woman my age and think grandmother on a layover. I have learned that invisibility can be a shield when you choose it. The key card clicked in the door, and the room answered with a hum from the heater. I sat on the edge of the bed and let my breath find a steady rhythm. My phone lay flat on the coverlet like a quiet witness. I opened my contacts and called Harold Benson. Harold has been my attorney for 15 years. He answered with a voice that carried both sympathy and steel. I told him I needed to meet soon, and he said he would come to me. He arrived with a leather briefcase and the habit of careful eyes. We sat at the small desk that faced the parking lot, where taillights came and went like thoughts. He asked how bad it had been, and I told him enough. Harold placed 3 folders on the desk. He did not stack them. He let them sit side by side like pieces on a board. He said we would keep this simple. First, strike the deed. He slid a certified copy forward and tapped the line with my name. The suburban house is titled to Ella Anderson, with the old occupancy clause that had kept Charles comfortable and secure. Second, strike the portfolio. He opened the next folder to a clean summary from Anderson Monroe Holdings, LLC. The list named properties across Chicago, Boston, and New York City, with addresses that read like a map of good decisions. Third, strike the skyscraper. He turned the last folder, and there it was. A skyscraper in New York City, valued at $29 million, with clean title and conservative appraisal notes. I let the numbers pass through me without heat. This was not revenge. This was structure doing what structure does when someone has built it carefully. Harold watched my face and then nodded, as if he saw what he needed to see. We spoke about the next steps. He would arrange a formal reading at the law office that had contacted the family. He would confirm documents and notify parties. I told him I preferred a quiet room and a clear clock. He asked if I was ready to be very visible. I said I would be ready in time. He understood the difference and closed the briefcase with a soft click. After he left, I turned off the light and rested for a while. The heater breathed, and the ice machine on the floor coughed now and then. I slept like someone who had handed a heavy box to a friend who knew how to carry it. Morning drew a pale line across the curtain. I dressed in a way that did not invite questions. I drove a rental to the street across from my house and parked behind a tall pine. Amanda moved across the living room with a clipboard and a look that said new owner. A truck door slammed, and men carried a sofa through my front door. I watched her direct them toward Charles's study as if she could rearrange the past by sliding a desk. Nash stood near the bay window with his hands on his hips. He was nodding and nothing lost in the currency of approval. I watched him avoid his own reflection in the glass and felt a quiet sadness rise and settle again. Amanda stepped onto the porch to take a call, and I cracked the car window. Her voice came thin through the winter air. I heard her tell her mother that the house would finally look like a place that belongs to people who know what they are doing. Her mother must have asked a hard question. Amanda's voice softened in a way I had not heard before. She said she could not spend one more year being looked down on, not after growing up with hand-me-down winter coats and free lunch tickets. I closed the window and sat back. I thought about the way fear wears anger like a coat. I thought about how often shame tries to buy respect with showy furniture. By afternoon, the truck was gone, and the blinds were drawn. I drove downtown and let the skyline rise like a chart of choices. The doorman at the luxury hotel opened the door with a nod that did not pry. The lobby was warm and smelled faintly of lemon oil. A pianist touched the keys as if he were learning a new language. I booked one night and asked for a high floor and a quiet corner. The elevator lifted me to a view I knew well. The river cut a silver path, and the streets made their grid like old parchment. I set my bag on the stand and called room service. Dinner arrived under a metal cover that caught the city lights. I ate slowly and watched the windows become mirrors. I remembered who I am when no one is pointing and judging. I took a long shower and let the water ride calm along my shoulders. I set out the suit I would wear when the room and the papers and the faces lined up. I placed my shoes where I could find them in the morning light. My phone buzzed on the table. Messages stacked in a column. Amanda wanted explanations about some confusing papers she had found. She wanted access. She wanted speed. I lowered the volume and faced the glass again. Somewhere on a nearby street, sirens wailed and then faded. The city has its own metronome, and I kept time with it. I opened my calendar and looked at the note Harold had sent. The words sat clean and precise. The room would be ready, the file would be ready, the clock would be watched. I closed the calendar and placed the phone face down. The pianist paused and then found a new melody lighter than before. I breathed with it and let my thoughts settle like snow on a quiet block. The bed was firm and the sheets were cool. I lay there and counted the small sounds that prove a building is alive. Somewhere below, a hallway door closed, and a suitcase wheel sang a short song. I pictured the hallway at home and the empty hook where a key should hang. I pictured my hand reaching toward it in a future I would choose. I let that picture carry me into sleep. Morning would come with its errands and its careful face. The hotel coffee would be too strong and just right. The suit would zip without a fight. I knew Amanda would call again. I knew Nash would wait for her instruction. I let that knowledge pass by like a bus I did not need to catch. On the desk, the calendar reminder waited like a small lighthouse. The light did not blink, but I felt it anyway. Monday, 2 o'clock. The law office in downtown Chicago smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. A long table stretched between us, wide enough to feel like a barrier. At exactly 2 o'clock, the attorney cleared his throat and began to read. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, steady and still. Across from me, Amanda leaned forward in her chair, her chin high, her nails tapping on the table in sharp beats. Nash sat beside her, his shoulders tight, his eyes darting everywhere but to mine. The others flanked them all, expectant and restless. The words of the will fell into the quiet like stones into deep water. Each child was to receive $50,000. Amanda's head jerked, and her lips parted as if she had misheard. The attorney continued stating that the remainder of the estate, including all property and accounts, belonged to me. The room froze. For a moment, there was only the hum of the heating system. Then Amanda broke the silence. She insisted I had never worked, that I had only lived off Charles, that this was a mistake. Her voice cracked with a mix of rage and disbelief. Nash stared at his hands, his knuckles pale against the dark wood. Harold Benson, calm as ever, opened his briefcase. He slid the first document forward. It was the deed to the house where Amanda had stood on my porch only days earlier and told me to leave. My name glowed in black ink across the top line. Amanda's hand hovered before she snatched the paper and scanned it with trembling eyes. The second folder opened with a rustle. Harold pushed a neat portfolio across the table, the summary of Anderson Monroe Holdings, LLC, 21 properties listed in 3 cities, each one documented and current. Amanda's father leaned forward to read, and his face shifted from curiosity to alarm. Her mother's mouth tightened in quiet dismay. They were seeing the truth she had hidden from them. Harold placed the last folder before them with deliberate weight. It contained the title and appraisal of a skyscraper in New York City valued at $29 million. The pages gleamed white under the overhead lights. The number sat bold and undeniable. Amanda's hand faltered, and she pushed the paper away as if it burned. The silence was thick enough to choke on. No one spoke for several long breaths. I let the pause hang. I wanted them to feel the air close in around their assumptions. Finally, I spoke in a calm voice that carried across the table. Family is not blood. It is respect and truth. Amanda's mother turned to her daughter, her eyes sharp. In that moment, the polished mask Amanda wore slipped. Her parents understood they had been misled, that the story they had been told about me was a lie. The shame on their faces cut sharper than any words could. Nash shifted in his seat, his hand shaking as he lifted a glass of water. He could not meet my gaze. His jaw worked, but no words came. Snow began to fall outside the window, tiny flakes drifting against the gray sky, soft and relentless. I leaned forward slightly, my voice even and unshaken. "You have 72 hours to remove yourselves from my house. After that, the law will treat you as trespassers." The attorney nodded, confirming the words with his presence. Amanda's face went pale. Her hands curled into fists on the table. Nash's shoulders slumped, as if the weight of years had dropped onto him all at once. Behind them, the snow thickened, blotting out the skyline until only shadows of buildings remained. The meeting ended with the scrape of chairs and the hollow sound of paper sliding back into folders. I stood calmly and buttoned my coat. Across the glass, I watched the flakes swirl, erasing the outlines of the city, as if the world itself was wiping the slate clean. The 72 hours passed faster than I expected. On the evening of the deadline, I stood by as the locksmith removed the old hardware and fitted new locks into the doors. The sound of the drill echoed through the quiet house like a line drawn in stone. When he handed me the new key, I carried it to the hallway and hung it on the empty hook. For the first time in months, the house felt like mine again. That single key glinted under the light, a reminder that I would now decide who belonged inside. 6 months later, the phone rang just after sunrise. The voice on the other end was from Mercy General Hospital. Nash had been in a car accident. He was stable, but had listed me as his emergency contact. My breath caught in my throat as I wrote down the room number. I changed from my garden clothes into a simple dress and pearl earrings. The drive into the city felt longer than it was. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and quiet fear. Nash lay propped up in bed, with one arm in a sling and a cast covering his leg. His eyes found mine the moment I stepped in. He whispered that he was sorry and that he remembered every choice he had failed to make when Amanda pushed me out of my own home. He said he betrayed the woman who raised him. His voice broke when he asked me if forgiveness was possible. I pulled the chair close and rested my hands on my knees. I told him I could not erase the pain. I said trust could only return if he rebuilt it through honesty, responsibility, and independence. I made it clear that I would not carry him, but if he chose to stand on his own with integrity, I would consider starting again. Tears ran down his face, but he nodded, understanding this was the only chance he had left. As we sat there, I thought about Amanda. I had once overheard her speak of hand-me-down coats and the shame of free lunches in school. She had been poor, always afraid of being judged, and that fear had hardened into cruelty. I could see how her need to feel superior had fueled her contempt for me. That knowledge softened my anger, but it did not erase the scars she left behind. Some actions closed doors forever. When I returned home, the garden greeted me with roses heavy in bloom. Their colors glowed in the late afternoon sun, and the air carried the clean scent of earth. My phone buzzed with tentative calls from my other children. Their voices were unsure, filled with small apologies and careful words. I answered only one, then let the others wait, knowing that time would tell who truly wished to reconnect. Inside the hallway, the single key still hung in its place. I touched it lightly and felt the strength of my choice. Peace, I realized, is not about wealth or property. Peace is having the right to decide who belongs in your life. If you were in my place, would you open the door again or leave it locked? Tell me what you would do.